Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Green. I'm a wildlife biologist for Weyerhaeuser Company's Environmental Research Program, and it's an honor to have the opportunity to present early study results in a project that Dr. Scott Rush, Blake Grisham, Jim Ray, and Joe Segrist and I have been working on, titled Establishment of Eastern Purple Martin Colonies Within Privately Owned Working Forests. Participants of this conference are well aware of the challenges and successes of conserving the purple martin. Specifically, the species is experiencing population declines throughout much of its geographic range, and loss of nesting areas and prey availability are implicated as several factors contributing to these declines. Among the challenges and successes include the fact that the species nests almost exclusively in provision housing provided by landlords, typically in their own backyards. This quite possibly makes the model for managing purple martins one of the most impactful and significant citizen scientist-led initiatives in existence. More broadly, many bird species in North America nest in a different type of private property, specifically working forests. Working forests cover nearly 180 million hectares throughout the eastern United States. And in the southern United States, 87% of these forests, or 93 million hectares, are privately owned. Most working forests are used for timber production and are managed under a sustainable forestry standard, guiding environmental considerations. These working forests contribute substantially to the conservation of native plants and animals, including numerous imperiled species. These forests provide important early successional conditions that support rich species diversity, including bird and insect communities. There's a growing shift with private lands management to promote early successional open canopy conditions, which are generally lacking on a lot of public lands in the southern US. And as you can see in the background image, these open canopy areas, particularly young forests, make up about 25% of the working forest landscape. Given the importance of these areas for many forest birds, we wanted to test the ability to erect managed provision housing within private working forests to establish and maintain new colonies of eastern purple martins. Our study is ongoing, but over the long term, our primary objective includes assessing three phases, which we'll cover in the upcoming slides. Essentially, we are evaluating our ability to establish colonies of purple martins, to maintain those colonies, and assess the resiliency of the species and its ability to utilize natural nesting sites within our study area. Additionally, our secondary objectives include empowering the next generation of landlords by getting students and working forest employees in the field and giving them hands-on experiences with capturing and banding birds. Additionally, knowing that loss of food resources is a factor in their decline, we are assessing the differences between the diet from our study area and a lakeside colony located 80 kilometers to the north. For phase one, we wanted to assess whether we can establish purple martin colonies in working forests. To address this question, we selected our study area to be located within a 25,000 hectare block of loblolly pine working forests in Noxubee and Kemper counties, Mississippi. This has been a focal landscape for environmental research for over 50 years. The area is a mixture of interior flatwoods and rolling hills. In addition to the planted pines, includes mature pine hardwood or hardwood stands, often associated with streamside management zones. In January of 2020, we erected 9 gourd racks within our study area. We systematically selected young forests between the ages of 0 to 2 years old in areas of high landscape heterogeneity and adjacent to streamside management zones, and with adjacent stands to be clear-cut harvested within 3 years that will eventually serve as a relocation site when the early successional conditions around our gourd racks decline. There are a couple things to note here within the study map. One is that we numbered our gourd racks 1 through 9 in a north to south orientation. The second is looking at gourd racks 5 and down through gourd racks 9 are going to make up the bulk of this presentation for the study results. We've aimed to survey the gourd racks weekly and sometimes bi-weekly to assess whether purple martins are present, whether they're using the gourds, such as for nesting, and both to evaluate nest and chick survival. We're banding many of the chicks prior to fledging and taking blood samples from birds from multiple nests to assess nutrient assimilation through a stable isotope analysis, i.e., what are these birds eating? Our first year, 2020, was unique. We had no detections of purple martins for most of the breeding season. However, on July 1st, while conducting a late survey, we observed 8 birds at gourd rack number 7, the southwesternmost gourd rack in our study area, and soon after 4 nests were initiated. Activity continued to grow throughout July, and by July 20th, we observed 65 birds at one time. We banded 8 fledglings from 3 nests, and we had also collected blood samples from those fledglings for the diet analysis. We also observed signs of occupancy at gourd rack number 9, our southernmost gourd rack, from feathers and feces in a gourd. We also observed an unidentified nest at gourd rack number 6, but we do not believe that to be a purple martin. What we eventually learned is the reason the activity increased to at least 65 birds that first July is that we had a pre-migratory roost site forming near our study area, where birds were concentrated around fish farms in the evenings and then going out into the working forest during the day to feed. In the left photo, you can see many martins perched in a dead tree during that period near one of our gourd racks. In the center photo, you can see a radar image of birds leaving the roost site just to the east of our study area, which is right in here. And in the right photo, the aggregation of birds in late July of that first year. Interestingly, birds have continued to congregate in the same areas in 2021 and are present today in high numbers. During July and August months of each year, we've sometimes counted hundreds of martins active at the stands where we have gourd racks, but notably less abundant or in lower densities at the adjacent stands. In 2021, martins first colonized that rack used in 2020, and we had nests and reproduction at 5 of the 9 gourd racks. And we also had a nest built but not completed at a different gourd rack. We also observed birds using stands at 2 other sites during migration in which they did not attempt to build nests. We banded chicks from 19 nests distributed across the 5 occupied gourd racks. Also that year, we documented our first mortality event, with a gray rat snake having made it past the predator garden occupying one of the gourds, which you can see in the bottom left photo. Results from 2022 have largely mirrored those from 2021, with more nests and chicks born at the same 5 gourd racks as before. Again, all at the central and southern end of our study area. This year, we're also able to test out the second phase of our project, which asks the question of whether we can relocate gourd racks during the winter season to nearby stands where habitat conditions deteriorate, specifically when pine trees get too tall. We moved 2 of the gourd racks further south, a few kilometers from 2 racks that were at capacity, as you can see here within the area that I'm highlighting. Interestingly, martins have produced multiple nests at one of these sites and have been present regularly at the other, but never finished a nest. Also this year, we placed a trail camera at each gourd rack to better assess visitation and dates associated with arrival, departure, and nest initiation. Interestingly, 2 years ago, martins first arrived in late June and early July, and this year we had martins returning in late February. The only mortality event that we observed this year was from what appears to be a Cooper's hawk, as you can see in the central photo, which took, to our knowledge, only 1 bird. We are still working through the diet analysis and will continue to collect blood samples from chicks in the future. For now, what we found is that carbon and nitrogen was lower in chicks from our forested colonies compared to those born adjacent to Columbus Lake. And specifically, these results suggest that martins at our study area are eating insects derived from both streams and from C3 and C4 forest plants, whereas those from the Columbus Lake site are more likely to be predominantly derived from aquatic resources. You can see on the images to the right just some of the variability that we're capturing in both carbon and nitrogen values among different forest birds. As activities increased, this also allowed us to gain insights into the materials the purple martins are using to build nests. We found a lot of variability related to the vegetation, structure, and composition of the stand where the gourd rack is located. For example, if there's a lot of bare ground, then birds seem to use more bark and green leaves, as you can see in the bottom left image. If there's a lot of herbaceous vegetation, then birds use more grass, as you can see in the second image. And curiously, as we were removing some nests this year, we found some to include a lot of dirt and specifically mud within the construction of the nest. You can see a little bit of that in the third image. And some even have items such as broken glass, and several nests had snail shells, as you can see in the rightmost image. To our knowledge, these are the first purple martins ever fledged in a working forest landscape within the range of the eastern subspecies. So far this year, we've already fledged a little over 100 birds, and that's likely to increase as remaining nests are incubated and chicks are raised. We expect these numbers to increase in future years as we relocate the northern gourd racks to areas where martins are already nesting. The increasing use of the gourd racks over time reflects the positive adoption of colonies within this managed forest system. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, working forests cover approximately 180 million hectares across the eastern United States. Our next challenge is figuring out how we can scale this idea and this concept to new areas and recruit more purple martins into natural areas. As we continue this project, we plan to expand several areas of our research. For the diet work, we'd like to start using DNA metabarcoding to better understand what insect species are making up the diets of both parents and chicks. We also want to start banding adults to assess whether birds born in this system are returning in the future years, including how those birds are moving between gourd racks. Also, we want to refine the protocol for relocating gourd racks to maximize colonization rates and retain birds when racks are moved. And the southern working pine forests are very dynamic, and there's a lot that we can learn about if or how the understory plant community is influencing nest and chick survival. For example, the images below are the same rack location, taken in both February and July of 2020. And you can see from these images that the forb community can rebound greatly during the first growing season. One of the challenges of working in such a dynamic system is testing our third phase, specifically determining if we can entice a subspecies to return to nesting in natural structures such as hollows of live and dead trees by deploying provision housing near areas with high concentrations of natural cavities. We know that purple martins are currently using snags with cavities as perch sites, as you can see in the top right photo. But not all snags are created equally. New snags, such as those in the top left photo, have wood that's often too hard for many birds to create a cavity, and trees in young forests will grow too tall before those snags become suitable for purple martins. The other end of the spectrum is snag retention. The older a snag is, the softer the wood, and often, once those are exposed after a timber harvest, they fall over during strong winds, as you can see in one of the top images. As we continue this project in the future, we'll keep you posted on our findings. We'd like to finish by thanking the Purple Martin Conservation Association for funding and the many volunteers who have assisted us in the field. The era of COVID has created challenges, particularly for our ability to get students and forest industry employees involved in our research, but we have been successful. We've taken many students out for both survey experience and banding experience, and we'll continue to grow this part of our study in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Green. I'm really excited about this particular avenue of research. You know, of course, the dream is that purple martins return to their natural nesting methods. Of course, we all know that there's challenges to that, but you know, we'll see what we can do, right? Um, Let me find you here. There you are. All right. Couple of questions already in chat. Daniel, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, loud and clear. All right. This from Barbara. The PMCA teaches that there should be a 30-yard distance between racks and trees. Apparently, your research challenges that. Can you respond?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about this and decided there were two different phases to this, and one is making sure that we were getting as close to the stand centers as possible. So we were minimizing the distance from adjacent forest stands and maximizing that distance between the trees. Um, we also wanted to have kind of near proximity to these dead trees to encourage the birds to utilize them both as perches, and a lot of these have really well defined cavities that are good for species like red-headed woodpeckers. So softwood, fairly degraded. Um, there might be mortality events that we haven't witnessed, but we have been maintaining um, capacity at some of these racks. So we have 12 gourds per rack, and we're producing 12 nests pretty reliably. So um, any type of predation events is going to be minimal, but 30 is probably, yeah, we might be pushing a little bit, but we want to keep trying to get them um, to utilize those stands. And one little quick tangent is during the development of this project and talking to some of our Western counterparts in Oregon and Washington, I found out that 25, 30 years ago, there was a study in which they actively created snags in the Pacific Northwest. And after about 20 years, purple martins came in and started utilizing those. So that's the Western subspecies, but certainly has, I think, a lot that we can learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that there is a active effort to create artificial snags in California that's happening right now. That'll be interesting to see. But yeah, it seems like it's reasonable that something like that could be accomplished here. Um, what are you doing? This is from Terry. What are you doing to prevent gray rat snake predation?
We have baffles on these gourd racks, and the one snake that got past it, um, it was big. I don't remember how big it is. There's a picture of Dr. Scott Rush in one of the last slides holding it, and it was probably a 5 foot snake. So it may have just been persistent. There was no structure that it could get around, but that's the only snake that we've had in there.
Let's see here. Oh, this is kind of an extension of the previous question from Tim. This study also indicates martins do not necessarily need to be close to human habitation. Dot dot dot.
That's an interesting point too. And earlier I was playing on Google Earth looking at the proximity to residential areas, and we probably have somewhere between a 2 to 2.5 mile, or upwards of 4 kilometer distance between our occupied gourd racks and the nearest residential area. And I'll extend that question, the proximity to water, because we've already heard a little bit about that today. And it seems that we have that same distance, maybe 2 miles or so to open surface water like a pond. Um, but historically, there would have probably been large concentrations of snags or trees with big hollows, and still today within a lot of these riparian areas. And so that was one of the things that we wanted to have the adjacency of, and we did in a couple of racks this year find freshwater mussel shells, small ones within the nest. So there is evidence that they're getting into those areas for feeding.
Absolutely. So many great questions in chat. We're not going to be able to get anywhere close to all of them here in our time frame. All right, here's a quick one from Madeline, and then I think we'll have to go on to our next talk. Does part of your encouragement of using natural cavities or these cavities in these artificial cavities in natural settings include removing invasive species to reduce competition. You guys have trouble with sparrows and starlings out there?
I've never seen a sparrow or a starling in this landscape, and we have 20 something years of reoccurring bird survey data, and they almost never show up. So we're really fortunate, and it might be the remoteness
Yeah.
that we're benefiting from.
Yeah, I bet so. It seems like as you really get remote, you don't end up with the sparrows and starlings like you do in more urban areas or closer to farms where they've got access to feedlots and that sort of thing. So,
If they do show up, we'll remove them.
got it. Good.
Yep.
It's good to know.
Yep.
All right. Well, Dr. Green, if you don't mind sticking around in chat at least and answering some of these other questions, we are going to go on to our next speaker.